welcome to another episode of the Multi-Location Marketing Leader. I'm Erin Martin, and this episode is brought to you by NetCertive, a marketing provider who can help you run better local digital advertising programs. Today, our guest is Doug Zarkin. He's the Chief Marketing Officer of Pearl Vision, where he currently leads the transformation of the brand's global strategic marketing, visual merchandising, and product promotion. Doug, I'm excited to have you on. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And just to dive in and give our audience some background on yourself, can you tell us more about your current role at Pearl Vision and what you do there?
Sure. So just celebrating my 9th year as part of the Pearl Vision family, where I lead the marketing function. Marketing in our system is pretty complex in that it's all of the traditional things that you would think about in terms of motivating a consumer to take action. But it also includes leading our visual merchandising team, as well as critically our field marketing team, who are folks on the ground that are responsible for working with each and every one of our franchisees to ensure excellence at that eye care center level.
Awesome. And I know that when you joined back in 2012, you've probably seen a ton in that time frame. So when you were stepping in then, what were some of the biggest challenges you were facing?
Sure. So I think in any system, especially a franchise system, when you have folks that are paying into a marketing fund, what they're really looking for is thought leadership. What they're really looking for is a vision. What they're really looking for, frankly, are results. And I think the brand had done a nice job in some areas of its proposition back to the franchisees. But frankly, I think what was necessary was really strong thought leadership and a plan for how we were going to elevate the Pearl Vision brand back to where it was, frankly, in the 80s and the 90s when we were the leading brand in optical retail. So I had the privilege of collaborating with many of our longstanding franchisees, as well as folks that, frankly, had fired us either as a customer or as a franchisor, and understanding where were the opportunities for us to enhance our platform. And so over the last 9 years, I'm proud to say that we have really solidified the strength of the Pearl Vision brand. We are now the number 32 brand on Entrepreneur's Top 500 list and the number 1 optical franchise brand in the industry. So a lot of great progress has been made in really making Pearl an incredible investment opportunity, but most importantly for consumers, an incredible brand.
And so for some context for our listeners, you guys handle all of the marketing programs, national and local, for your franchisees, correct?
Absolutely. We want our licensed operators, which is what we call them, our licensed owners. We want them to focus on a commitment to care. They didn't go to business school. While they may have a cousin or a nephew inevitably who's in the agency world, they're really looking at us to be that thought leader, to figure out how we're going to put this brand on the brain of a consumer, how we're going to win that local battle for share of mind and share of wallet, how frankly we're going to strengthen the trust between our neighbors and our eye care centers. And so they're looking to us to establish that center of excellence. And naturally, we handle all facets of marketing and brand communications for them.
When you stepped into this role, was it like that when you came in, or did you help morph towards that ownership piece? Because I can see that as being a strong benefit to any franchisee who wants to buy in, to just completely not worry about it. So how did you make that happen?
So, there was what was inherent in the franchise agreement, and then there was actually being executed. And I think while the franchise agreement at the time was strong and facilitated us taking advantage of those opportunities for the franchisees, I think, frankly, we had a lot of work to do in substantiating the trust that a franchisee plays back to the brand in trusting us, not only with driving their business, but also, frankly, their financial investment. So we had a lot of work to do in really solidifying and in building out some of the capabilities that now proudly exist today. The good news is that, as we're talking, we're coming off of record years after record years, a phenomenal recovery from the pandemic. And I think this brand is stronger than it's ever been, mainly because I think we have a really strong relationship between our eye care centers, our owners, and obviously the brand leadership.
What does that relationship look like? What pillars have you put in place to keep that going? Or give us an idea of what that national and local mix and communication plan looks like.
So anybody who works in a franchise system knows that it's inherently an emotional-based system. And as I like to say, consumers of all types make emotional decisions before they make rational choices. And so
true.
with an emotion-based model, you really have to focus on earning the trust. We have, I think, established a very strong foundation for leading by listening. That doesn't mean that if a franchisee wants to do A, B, or C, we're going to agree with it. But our job is to really listen to those needs and come back to them with solutions. Tell me what your need is. Tell me what your problem is. Let me come back to you with the solve. In some cases, we've been able to collaborate with our owners on the ground to find solutions that maybe have sprung up from something organically that's being done at a neighborhood level. But in most cases, what I think we've been able to do is to bring a center of excellence mentality to this discipline. Our plan, both nationally and locally, is really about earning trust. It's a layered approach. To say that video is dead is silly, just like it's silly to say that, well, I want a digital-based marketing plan. A consumer isn't spending all of their time behind one medium. And so what you really need to think about is a multi-point of contact approach with the consistency of messaging and a language to your brand that, again, facilitates strong connections and allows people to understand why they should trust their eyes to Pearl.
What does that marketing mix look like for you guys right now then?
I mean, I could tell you, but then I have to kill you. That's our playbook.
Top secret.
And while I won't reveal the specific plays in the playbook, what I will say is that where we have excelled and continue to make great progress is in our ability to geo-target at a digital level. While we are in about 87 DMAs across US and Canada and Puerto Rico, density of footprint varies. And so to ensure no waste, we have a very strong sort of geo parameter within our buys. We're taking advantage of the latest technology in a measured and controlled way. Fear of missing out is not a marketing strategy. And so we don't chase technology. We figure out how to embrace technology, especially when it comes to buying and planning, to be even more effective. But the power of storytelling is at the heart of what makes Pearl special. We take a lot of pride in our video storytelling. Consumers want to be told a story. They want to understand the narrative of your brand so that they can fall in love with what you stand for. And as a brand that cares about people behind the eyes, our marketing platform has to be one that has many layers to it.
Yeah, that's great. And how do you guys go about figuring out what those stories should be? I think a lot of marketers that I talk to have either recently gone through refining their brand, doing some, community engagement and learning more about the customer's emotional needs. What does that look like for you guys to be able to craft that perfect story?
So again, and I say this with a smile, a franchise system, you're never really short on feedback. You're really short on stories. So part of it is really just listening, but really it's about understanding our target audience. At Pearl, we refer to her as the chief health officer. She is the one making the health and wellness decisions for herself, her family. If we earn her trust, she'll trust us with her children, her parents, if they're still with them, her spouses or partners. And so we take a really deep dive into understanding her psychographic makeup, as well as demographically where she falls. And then it's really an exercise, a little bit of luck, a lot of skill, a lot of trial and error to refine the model and figure out an optimized plan. And then we're constantly optimizing based on those optimizations, because the beautiful thing about the art and science of marketing that I love is that it's never the same day, same thing twice. So you always have to be in listening mode in order to eventually lead.
Always changing, that's for sure.
Sure.
And I know one thing I've heard you say that you've helped overcome is when you are doing that local marketing or working with all these different franchisees, you've had to work to overcome being consistently inconsistent with your brand message. And so tell me a little more about that.
It kills me to see inconsistency in brand messaging. And that's not to say that you have to have matching luggage, but there is a love language that a brand has that should be woven through the vernacular, whether you're in social, whether you're in email, or whether you're on TV.
Oh, I love that. Love language.
There should be strategic premises that exist about what you're going to stand for. And there should be things that are just frankly off brand. And there's got to be real clarity as to the sense of purpose on what you want to achieve with your marketing. And that doesn't make a difference on whether you're on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt or you're on WNBC in New York. Your brand is your brand. You are as good as your worst location. You are as strong as your weakest link. And so the degree of consistency that we're relentless in pursuing allows us to feel very good about the reputation that we're creating in every market where we have an eye care center.
And what pitfalls would you give as kind of heads up or tips to other marketers who are trying to clean up their brand? Like, was there any tools or tricks that you think of as low-hanging fruit? Watch out for this, watch that.
Yeah, absolutely. Many of those I'm probably best to be shared over a frosty beverage, but a couple that I think are for public consumption are the following. The first thing is your brand positioning is not only your North Star for marketing, but it truly is your North Star for the brand. And so do you have a really comprehensive understanding of what your brand positioning is? If you do, that then allows you to have a pretty good filter as to whether something is on brand or off brand. The second thing is to stop focusing on the right way to do something, because there is no right way, just like there is no wrong way. It's about charting a way. And every brand is going to find a different way of doing things. Sure, there'll be commonalities, but it's less about worrying about what you're not doing or what you should be doing, and focus on doing what you believe you should be doing with a passion and intensity that's unmatched. The last thing, and I said this earlier, FOMO is not a marketing strategy. It drives me crazy to watch brands chase shiny pennies because they believe that they have to do it or else somebody else will. You know, if you are a brand that is selling hamburgers, that doesn't mean that you should be selling fried chicken. Okay. Be the best hamburger salesperson you can be. Be the best brand that stands for hamburgers, and then figure out extensions. Innovation begins with the letters in, and in stands for insight. The idea of innovation without insight is honestly just a waste of time, energy, and money. So ground the innovation you bring into a real insight that comes from a real understanding of your brand, but then also a real understanding of your target.
Yeah, which brings us to data and the insights. And so I'm sure, again, coming into the company in 2012, you've seen quite a transformation on the digital front, and are probably still waging the good fight there. How do you surface and think about data to manage your business and then also seek out those insights? As marketers, it's crazy.
Data is a dangerous animal because data truly does not make a decision for a marketer. A marketer makes decisions using data. And the reason is because data truly is only reflective of the questions that you ask and understanding what should and shouldn't be measured. I think, unfortunately, marketing has suffered a bit of atrophy in the idea that everything should be measured. Everything shouldn't be measured. There's some things that just don't necessarily align to material gains or losses. That why report them out on a dashboard? If you're doing more than 4 or 5 things, you're probably not doing any of them well. And so we are a data-fueled brand, but it's because the leaders who are using data have a really good understanding of the ecosystem in which that data comes from. Because data can lie. I can ask you a particular question in a certain way and get an answer that I want. But it's really understanding what you're asking about, where the materiality comes in. So we look at data, but we look at data across a very, tight and confined set of KPIs that are meaningful, that have proven to correlate to top line and bottom line growth. And we try to be as relentless as possible. Every once in a while, does a shiny penny pop up? Yes. But I think you learn from trial and error, how much time and energy to put towards those.
Yeah. And it seems like that would definitely be an iterative process in finding out what those leading and lagging indicators are that are the right to steer for your business. So do you have any tips or experiences or examples that you can share from your own career on learning what those right things are?
Yeah. I mean, I am probably one of the most vocal anti-mixed media modeling people that you'll ever encounter. And the reason is because modeling assumes a set of behaviors and a set of market conditions at a certain time and seeks to be predictive in saying, because this happened here, if you do the same thing now, you're going to get this result. I think we just came out of probably the most turbulent 12 months in the history of the world. And so if you were to put mixed media modeling information into what happened in 2020, you would have fallen flat on your butt. There was no third down and global pandemic in the marketing playbook. And so what I would say to anybody who's using modeling as a driver of decision making is, again, be very careful, because what it assumes is that the market conditions are the exact same. The weather is not the exact same. Your competitor's behavior is not the exact same. Your brand evolves and is not the exact same. So the responses that you're going to get probably aren't going to be the exact same. As a directional source of input, okay. For me, and I think for the Pearl Vision team, we really try to balance out the art and science of marketing. Pragmatism, listening, going out and watching people interact is an incredibly valid source of insight. It may not be statistically valid, but it's absolutely valid in fueling your curiosity as a leader and fostering the gut. Every marketer needs to have that inner voice that says, this is right or this is wrong. And I can think about some decisions that I've made during the course of my career where I went with my gut and they've worked out. I can think of a couple where I went with my gut and they haven't worked out, but you have to really refine that gut instinct to know when the data is lying or when the data is incomplete, or frankly, when the data has uncovered something that is really something that's going to give you incredible growth.
Yeah, that's good. Because I also think as marketers, sometimes we look and see, what another CMO might be doing, or take previous experience from a different role and think that could apply. And it's like, no, this is a whole different situation. It could be a whole different dynamics going on.
But the way you think, I think the way that you approach a challenge is something that you build on through the course of my career. I mean, look, I came out of intimate apparel. I spent a lot of time in the beauty industry. And before that, I was in entertainment. And those are completely different industries. The correlation was really about how I approach problem solving.
Yeah.
Where do those sources of inputs come? That approach to being consumer centric, to thinking about the consumer application first, and then working backwards, because strategy without the ability to have great execution is really nothing more than just words on paper. And so keeping that ability to formulate a vision for a brand is something that, frankly, I've benefited tremendously from the experiences I've had and the mentors I've had during the course of my career. But the only way to really learn the optical industry or the beauty industry is to be in it. And, that's why it's hard in many cases to break into an industry that you haven't worked in before, because people are reluctant because you don't have industry experience. What you have is consumer experience. What you have is influencing experience. Those are unbelievably translatable.
Yeah, that's great. And I love that you mentioned a mentor. Is there any other examples of some key learnings that you've had from mentors over the years in your career?
Sure. I've had mentors that have taught me things that I use every day. I've also had mentors in a negative way that I would never want to be, that I would never want to behave like. And I can think of a couple where, I worked for somebody, I won't mention this person's name, but I worked for somebody for a few years, and she enjoyed taking the credit for everybody else's work and never took the opportunity to elevate or share in the journey. You can lead from the front or you can lead from behind. There's a lot of gratification to both. And I think what she taught me was the importance of leading from behind. Sometimes elevating those that work for you is more gratifying than you being elevated for the work that you've done. There's no point in climbing a mountain and achieving incredible results if there's nobody to share in the journey or maybe even to take a selfie with. So I've learned incredible lessons from those that have taught me to think, but those have also taught me to not think like them.
Yeah, that's great. I love that advice. And real quick on the data piece, I know that there's a lot of privacy concerns that are there in the industry right now, a lot of policy changes. It's all a big hot topic right now. So how are you thinking about some of this cookie depreciation and the privacy concerns that are going on? And do you have any tips for other marketers on that?
So everybody breathe. Take a deep,
First and foremost, breathe.
Just breathe. Okay. It's going to be okay. You're still, with iOS 14 and all of the changes to privacy, the ability to market at a one-to-one level with the degree of saliency that we've had to date, yes, it's gone. However, the opportunity to build cohorts, the importance of your first-party data, frankly, your understanding of where your consumer is, that's all still there.
Yeah.
Have they made it more complicated? Sure. But I think what they've actually done is they forced many marketers to get off the couch and not be lazy. Plugging something into an algorithm and letting the algorithm spit out the right way to do things, I always get nervous because the algorithm can break. Algorithms are only as good as the inputs and the codes that foster it. For us, sure, we're a little nervous. Yes, the 28 to 7-day attribution window on Facebook stinks. Okay, we're dealing with that. But the bottom line is smart messaging, breakthrough creative will win every day. It's like people thought traditional television is dead. Traditional television is not dead. Crappy programming on traditional television is dead. Just like Amazon didn't kill retail. Amazon killed shitty retail. If you are a great retailer with a really good assortment of product and an incredible experience, Amazon is not going to hurt your business. If you are a commodity business that has no point of difference, no experience, doesn't take pride in the way in which you treat people, then yes, Amazon's going to be a problem. So I just think we as an industry need to breathe. It will work out. It inevitably always does. Just don't panic.
Yes. And so I'm curious for you guys, are you doing OTT or connected TV right now as a part of your marketing as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's been great progress. I'm super excited about HBO Max taking on advertising because I think their programming is among the best. I think competition is good, and especially in working with partners like Hulu. There's a lot of room in those platforms, but it's no different than when satellite radio came on the scene. What happened with terrestrial radio? Terrestrial radio didn't die. People just shifted its uses of terrestrial radio. So we use terrestrial radio in a different way than we used it 10 years ago. But I'm actually really excited about the curation of content in a video format. It's disappointing because you have the ability in many cases to fast forward through commercials, but in many cases you don't. And I think consumers are willing to watch a great execution in order to get great content. You just don't want to run a 3-minute commercial in a 30-minute program. That's asking way too much. But if somebody's getting a 30-minute program for free to watch 30-second commercials every, 5 or 6 minutes, most consumers are okay with it.
Yeah. And I know a lot of franchise marketers, there's still a big portion who have not taken the leap into that medium. Are there any tips you'd give them on what to watch out for if they're first diving in?
So, we enjoy a competitive advantage because we have a pretty amazing center of excellence from a media perspective, within our company that we lean on, and we have external partners that help us facilitate great buys. So again, without revealing too much in the playbook, what I would say is this: it is about audience aggregation. So you need to be thinking about your demos of your consumer first and foremost. Unlike any other programming out there, OTT has a unique ability to not only sync up your demographics, but also proximity. So if you are a Midwest brand, you may not want to do OTT because OTT tends to pull very heavily from the coasts. Okay. So again, fear of missing out is not a marketing strategy. You may instead want to look at something like YouTube, okay, that has more of a countrywide pull. You may want to look at experimenting with different channels within the YouTube framework. You may want to make a decision to do a local test. Don't feel like you got to dive into the water all the way in. Dip your toe, play a little bit, see what it does in terms of your site traffic, see what it does in terms of your store traffic, and then make a decision. For us, what we love about it is that it allows us to lay a national foundation of video content in a geo-targeted way with little to no waste, and allows us to give video content to every DMA within the Pearl Vision family. And then we build on it with a number of different things, local OTT, local television, local radio, et cetera, that allows us to really win that share of voice battle at the local level.
Yeah, that's great. And one thing I hear a lot is print dead? And it's like, well, no, direct flyers are not necessarily dead in all communities, maybe some, but not others. You can't, do a blanket statement like that.
I don't think any medium is dead. I think if you want to see a really interesting experiment now that the world is traveling again, watch people in an airport. Watch what they buy at Hudson News, besides gum and water, okay? And an oversized bag of Doritos that they regret eating on the plane. The magazine business is not dead. It's shifted. Your source of news and insight real time is no longer magazines. Obviously, it's the internet. But there's something really interesting about getting lost in a physical magazine, just like books are not dead. Watch somebody holding a paperback or a hardcover. They get lost in it. They're reading it on their Kindle. For all intents and purposes, a Kindle is a book, physical book. So I don't think that the medium is dead. Is it a source for driving advertising awareness? Not as much as it was when I started in the business 20 years ago. But again, I don't think a medium is dead. I think the newspaper industry is really fascinating. I think they've had to pivot. In some markets, we dig into newspaper, especially local papers. People really rely on their local papers for information.
And I will be going to an airport tomorrow, so I'm going to be thinking of that now when I get my gum, water, and Doritos for the plane.
Oh, yeah. So grab your gum, grab your Doritos, and grab your magazine.
Yeah. And I think one piece of that is almost like not overthinking it. Back to your gut comment. We know as humans our visceral needs, and how do we put ourselves in the shoes of the consumer to see, where we are or what those experiences would be, and almost like not overthinking it, or don't getting overwhelmed by the data to make it more complicated than it really is.
There are so many choices and options that exist to put a brand on the brain of a consumer. It really comes down to what are your objectives, what are your budgets, what's the size of your business. It's not a one size fits all. Even if I wanted to give you the Pearl Vision playbook, which I won't, it wouldn't be applicable for a number of folks that are interested in what we're talking about today, because our brand is in a very different situation and a very different market than yours. I think at the core, you want to connect with people in your community. There are so many ways to go about that. Traditional media, non-traditional media. Pick one, do it, see what happens. Pick another one, do it, see what happens. My boss likes to use the expression sum of marginal gains. Building a marketing plan from scratch for a small franchise business is about sum of marginal gains. For a brand like ours, it's really about significant wins, where you're going to put your bets, being as robust as you can with the intent of design when it comes to a plan, and being choiceful. I probably get 30 or 40 emails and calls a day from people pitching us on things. And the threshold for saying yes has to be refined, because if not, you'll drive yourself crazy with chasing things that you really shouldn't be chasing.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I know another thing I've heard you say is just get out of the boardroom. And
oh my God,
share a little bit more about your passion behind that statement and what that looks like.
I mean, in my younger days, when I was in the intimate business and the beauty business, I got myself thrown out of many a department store from being creepy, I guess, and watching people shop. But for me, it was an interesting opportunity to learn the consumer behavior. I'm probably one of the few guys that you'll ever meet that was an Avon lady and that knows how to fit a bra. Both things that I learned in the course of my career. That have absolutely no practical use now. If my 13-year-old knew any of that, I think she'd freak out. But you cannot figure out the insights that could be material if you don't understand in real time what your consumer journey is. And, whether you have the opportunity as a marketing leader to work in a physical location, if you have a physical location, or be part of the customer service team to deal with consumer feedback, it is so important that you don't live behind the shield of spreadsheets and PowerPoint decks, and you have a real pragmatic understanding of how your business runs. That'll allow you to gauge wins and losses. That'll also allow you to call nonsense when you hear something. Because again, in an emotional system, which any franchise system is, sometimes it's really hard to understand on whether that's a problem that's systemic, or whether that's an individual issue, or whether it's nothing that somebody is trying to make material.
Yeah. And how do you coach that for your team then too? I think it's one thing to put yourself out there and understand the benefits that come from it, and then getting someone else to have that lens, do you have an immersion week where you require all employees to, go in and get their hands dirty, or what does that look like for?
I mean, pre-pandemic, we would go out to our eye care centers and meet with our licensed owners and spend time in them. Post-pandemic, it's really about conversations. One of the things that we spend a lot of time on in Pearl is our reputation management platform. We've partnered with a company called Reputation on really overseeing at a centralized level, having access to the data about what our narrative is. And brands, unfortunately, can no longer control their narrative the way they used to a decade ago. An angry consumer has a lot of outlets to complain. But it almost allows us to get real life store checks just by simply looking at our reputation score, reading the feedback. And people that are passionate either way will give you a lot of detail about their experience. The key thing is to not overcompensate either that you think you're really, really good and you aren't, or think you're really, really bad and you aren't, to try to find out kind of the middle of where your brand stands. So right now we're spending a lot of time in our reputation portal. Franchisees are very quick to pick up the phone and share with us their experiences. We're doing a lot of listening, but also really right now we're trying to do a lot of leading, because as we come out of the pandemic, there's a whole host of market that's out there for us to take advantage of, and we want to be the best at it for them and for ourselves.
Yeah, and what are some other examples of those leading tactics? Is it, or what beyond, I guess, just marketing campaigns too?
Yeah.
It sounds like you guys have a really robust back-end system for success.
We do. I mean, what I'll share with you, one example that I think we're really proud of is our online patient scheduler. So if you go to pearlvision.com, the entire website is designed to connect you to your neighborhood eye care center and get you to schedule your annual exam. And that is something that I helped to really evolve when I joined the business in 2012. It now accounts for roughly 1 out of 3 exams scheduled comes through our online portal. And it allows us to be best in class. It allows us to take advantage of the greater degree of intentionality that's happening today with people on their retail ventures, going out into the market, planning a little bit more purposeful decision-making, even in markets where vaccinations have reached scale. People are still a little cautious about going into brick and mortar. Our online portal allows us to connect with somebody when they've had the epiphany moment, either stimulated by us or by a life situation that they want an exam. They can connect immediately with their neighborhood eye care center, find a time, find a doctor, and get it on the books. And that lack of delay, that instant grat, is really our view of e-com. Like, that's our currency. Because if we fill the book, we can evolve them from a patient into what we call a retail patient or a customer.
Yeah, and I'm sure that, 1 out of every 3 booking an appointment online will just even go up from here. Everyone's looking for convenience.
It's been increasing double-digit per annum for the last 5 years.
So what other big initiatives do you have? That's I think, front and center for so many people. And even if it's, just a service, not necessarily product franchise, people are looking for easy ways to book those services and better tie data and,
Sure.
the whole journey together. What other big back-end system initiatives do you think are important to have buttoned up for a strong brand?
So this one falls outside of my remit as the head of marketing, but we have a phenomenal licensing and development team that is making it easier for independent doctors of optometry to join Pearl Vision. It's our Ignite program. And really what it does is allow folks who may have a practice and they want to mature it to find solace and strength in joining Pearl Vision. And, last year we had a record number of locations. I believe we opened 14 locations between March and December of last year during the pandemic. And we're on a record pace to exceed that this year. And so being able to have a back-end process in place that allows doctors and folks with small businesses in the optometry field or optical retail to align themselves with a brand like Pearl, super important. We have new product initiatives that we've launched. We just recently launched the Ray-Ban Authentic Lens, which takes the best-in-class Ray-Ban frame and now puts in it a state-of-the-art Ray-Ban official authentic lens so that your perfect pair is really perfect. These are things that contribute to why the trust that we hope to earn is well served by trusting your eye care and eyewear to Pearl. And there are several others, but at the end of the day, the most important initiative that we are working on today and tomorrow is really connecting with consumers to really substantiate the trust that is necessary to have a long, strong business.
Yeah, that's great. And I have a few more questions for you before we wrap up.
Sure.
And one that I'm personally passionate about hearing more about is you as a marketer and being such a strong, awesome voice for the brand. I think there's some other marketers out there who have kind of taken the leap and gotten themselves out there as a spokesperson and helped really good brand visibility because of that. And I see you out there who's someone doing it really well. So what advice or tips would you give someone who's kind of scared to put themselves out there like that and start on that journey? And what pros have you seen from your end of doing that?
So the first lesson is, if you're going to wear a t-shirt to a podcast, make sure you wear one that's better than this one. This one is awful. Cruddy neck. I apologize. Did not do a camera check before we started, so I apologize. But seriously, I think what's important is, if you are going to put yourself out as a representative of the brand, it is super important to remember that it's not about I, it's about we. You as a leader obviously are the ones that are calling the plays, but you're not executing the plays. Every play doesn't come from your mind and your mind only. So be generous in really speaking about the team. I think the second thing that's important is ensure that you're talking about something that you truly believe you are an expert in. Stay within your lane. You know, I'm not going to speak for hours on, lens technology or frame brand technology or a licensing and development program. We have leaders within our brand that are experts in that are the right people. What I am going to do is really speak about what we stand for as a brand. What are the things we're doing to connect our brand to consumers? And honestly, why somebody should take note of a brand like ours and the services. Why is eye care important? So have a really well articulated set of talking points that you feel comfortable speaking of. And I think the last piece of advice is be human. You get in front of a camera, whether it's one-on-one like you and I are speaking, or, on the Today Show or in front of a group of students. It's intimidating, but people want to get to know you as a person. We as leaders, we as people make a difference. I'd like to think the contribution that I've made at Pearl Vision is not just as the head of marketing, but as Doug, the human being. And inevitably, people want to follow people they can relate to, they can respect, and they can empathize with. So make yourself approachable, be humble, recognize that it's as much about the messaging that you're giving across as the message itself. And I think you've got a good foundation there to build an awareness for yourself as an ambassador out there in the market as.
Yeah, that authenticity is so key in terms, I mean, it sounds obvious, but I think a lot of people are scared to just show up and be themselves and stay in the area that they feel the most comfort or passionate about, because they feel like they need to be these experts on all these other things. And it's like, no, just show up and be yourself and be authentic. And, you will have value to add to someone.
I mean, I've been fortunate. I've had media training, and I'm constantly working on the ability to communicate in front of an audience, virtually or otherwise. And it's a work in progress. It's not easy. It's not easy to be able to listen to a question and react. It's not easy to know when you don't want to go down a road and how to pivot off it. It's not easy to be able to be self-deprecating, knowing that a lot of people are going to see it. You've got to be comfortable. Mm-hmm. That's not something that happens the first time. So you've really got to work at it to get that muscle in shape.
Yeah, practice. And I think even to have the confidence then to back up and defend what you do believe in, like you had just talked about, the marketing mix modeling and how you don't subscribe to kind of that way of thought and why, but that might not be popular among other marketers, but that's how, you've found that in your career and believe it. So to say it with gusto.
Because here's the thing, there's no right or wrong answer. There's just a perspective. Have a perspective. That doesn't mean you have to be provocative, but have a perspective, have an opinion. That's something that is fundamental 101. If you as a marketer are going to believe that you can actually get into the mind of a consumer and convince them to do what you want them to do, when you want them to do it, which, by the way, talk about a bold remit. I want you to get into the mind of a consumer and motivate them to take the action that we want them to take when we want them to take it. Go do it. Okay. Like, that's incredibly challenging. You have to have a prescriptive point of view. You cannot be somebody who's wishy-washy, or else honestly, you're going to fail as much, if not more, than you're going to succeed.
Yeah. Where I see a lot of marketers come to the table and being authentic and passionate is when they do align with the mission of the company, the values, like that is all in lockstep. I know I was talking to Kristen Pahacek of Massage Lux the other day, and she has just such a passion for self-care and that movement. And so for her, it's been this natural place for her to excel as a leader of that brand, the franchise system, and then her own career. And so I think that's an important piece to it too, is in the role that you seek as a marketer, there has to be that combined vision and value with this journey that you're on for the company.
You don't need to be a user of the product to market the product. I think that's a huge fallacy. In fact, for me, some of the accomplishments I'm probably either most known for or most proud of are for brands and products that I don't use, because it forces you to listen. What I do think is you as a leader have to be able to stand in front of the brand and believe that it has a degree of integrity, because passion is contagious, and marketers have to be passionate about what they do. So there has to be a belief in the efficacy of what you're doing. There's some products and services I would never market. There are some brands that I don't particularly use that I would be proud to be their head of marketing. So it's a balancing act. At its core, it's about leading a team of people. So as long as you're with a great group of people who share a belief system, then the product and service almost becomes secondary, in my opinion.
That's great. And just a few more questions for you. What does being a great marketing leader mean to you?
It really is about understanding that it's important to celebrate the progress, not just perfection. 80% of the time, if you can get to an 80% confidence level, you can make a decision. 20% of the time, you really need to be at 100% confident in order to make a decision. And that's true on evaluating creative. That's true on strategy. And I think early in my career, I probably got so caught up in it being perfect that I lost a little bit of the pleasure and the fun in celebrating the progress we made. Pearl Vision and franchise businesses in general force you to celebrate the progress, because you are never going to achieve perfection, because perfection is a moving target.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that tip. Do you have any examples of what your 20% of the ones that you want 100% nail are?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would say any of our TV executions where you're dealing with couple $100,000 / $1 million investments, huge visibility. I'm nitpicking every single aspect of it, but not losing sight of the overall message. Big budget outlays, I think, require a greater degree. Anything involving a number, you really need to have a much greater degree of preciseness. That doesn't mean that it needs to be 100% perfect alignment, that the decision is the right decision, but you need to make sure that your data is good data. To me, it is unacceptable to work with people who don't want to make a difference, like full stop. You can't teach passion. I would rather have somebody who is an average talent, but is an above average passion, than to have somebody who's above average talent and average passion, because somebody can will themselves to get the skill. Somebody who has the skill and not the will, there's nothing worse in the world than wasted talent. And I'd rather not surround myself with people who have great skill, but no will.
Yep. Hire the will, train the skill.
Absolutely.
And right now, is there any big challenge that you're just consumed with, top of mind right now? Like if there's one thing you could unstick or get advice from another marketer right now to unstick a big headache, what would that be?
I think as much as people believe that, the pandemic is over, it's not. And it's not in the sense, not that I mean that people are still suffering from COVID. They are. That's not what I mean. I mean that the impact of it is still with us. Hiring and staffing, retail journeys, hesitancy about going to brick and mortar, hesitancy about the school year and how they're going to start, of people's emotional state, your employees' emotional state. What is the movie that's been going on in their head behind the scenes for the last 12 to 18 months? And now that the sun is starting to shine and people are able to go outside without their masks in most states, what is that realization of what their life has been? Are they happy with what they've done in the last 18 months or not? Do they need a life change? So I think you've got to be concerned with the people behind the brand and be mindful of that. That being said, I think in large part, the work that you did during the pandemic to stay connected, to empathize with people that, like me, who had kids at home, went a long way into substantiating the trust that your team has in you as a leader and the team that you as a leader, the trust that you as a leader have in the team.
Yeah. Well, and final question for you, is there anything that you wished I would have asked that I didn't on our chat today?
Probably a marketer that I admire most.
Ooh.
Who have I looked at in the course of my career and said, yeah, that person had the goods.
I like that. So who would that be?
It's an interesting answer and it's very atypical. So that's why I kind of baited you into asking me it. It's Pete Roselle from the NFL. Pete Roselle, commissioner of the NFL, was not a marketer, but he recognized as the NFL was maturing what an amazing opportunity he had to create an experience. Inventing the Super Bowl was a stroke of genius. Recognizing that the sport is entertainment was a stroke of genius. Recognizing the power of the NFL Shield, which really matured under his leadership, was a stroke of genius. Much of what the NFL today is started with the foundational elements he put in play. That to me is a dream job. The opportunity to lead the NFL, because I think they're a franchise brand, ironically, okay, but they're one that really understands the importance of brand. They're one that really puts the consumer first. They're also one that I think has evolved to understand that it is okay to say we screwed up. Mm-hmm. And humility from a brand like that makes you love it even more.
Yeah, that's some great inspiration. And thank you for being such a great inspiration for our other marketers out there trying to fight the good fight on the digital transformation front, staying close to consumers and leading a team. It was great to have you on. And where's the best place for our listeners to connect with you? LinkedIn or other?
You can reach me on LinkedIn. You can reach me on Twitter at Doug Zarkin. Either of those is totally fine.
Awesome. Well, Doug, thanks for spending time with us today. It was great to have you on, the multi-location marketing leader, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Stay healthy, stay safe.